Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of the Fiercely Spiritual podcast. Thank you so much for being here. As always, I'm your host, Sandra Ray. I'm an author, healer, and spiritual teacher. And I wanted to talk about a topic today that is really important. I'm going to get into it in a minute. I wanted to mention, though, I'm actually recording this pretty late. It's the day I usually send out the podcast, and normally I'll have it recorded a week or at least a good few days in advance. And I was going to record it during the week, and the day that I'd set aside to record, I felt that I needed to spend the time meditating. And normally, I meditate a lot. Now, I usually will do some meditation in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon, some in the evening, some when I go to bed. But this day, I just felt I needed to sit in meditation for a prolonged period. And I don't know how long it was in the end. It might have been about 90 minutes or so. But I don't do long sessions like that often. But I just felt I needed to. So I listened to that guidance and I put off recording this. And I'm just finished doing today's new moon session with the members of the Fiercely Spiritual Family, my members group. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to be recording anyway, so I'm going to just leave it and record the podcast after that. And also, this is a long weekend in Ireland, so I've been out all weekend. We've been up the mountains, I've been in the forest, the boys have been out on their bikes, they've been doing little bike races, having fun. So we've been enjoying doing that. So I'm here now, and we are going to go into a topic that it's been coming up actually for the month of June, that all fear and doubt must be wiped out. And that was something that came to me the other day. And as I was thinking about it, I wanted to mention this because it's really important. Yes, all fear and doubt must be wiped out, but that doesn't mean there has to be a complete absence of fear. So let me explain. So when we live in a place of fear and doubt, we come from a place, and we were just actually talking about this in the Newman session that we did. We come from a place of being the victim, being in lack, being in that place of uncertainty, being in stress, anxiety, all those things that we associate with being in fear and doubt. Now, what I want you to do is to shift your perception of how you deal with fear from being sucked into it like we normally are. When it comes up, we're sucked straight in, it has us in its grips, to being in a place where you can be the observer of the fear, but not letting it trigger you. And this is how you wipe out fear. It's not the absence of fear, it's not getting rid of fear. It's being in the presence of fear, having that fear come up, but being able to observe it, being able to be with the fear as the observer and without getting triggered. So that is where we are aiming for. And it's not going to happen in one fell swoop. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to come away from listening to this and implement it in your life. You might, but normally it takes some time. Now, I have heard cases of people who have maybe read a transformative book, or even certain people who've just been in the presence of somebody who said something and they just thought, you know what, I'm not going to do the fear thing anymore. I'm not going to be in fear mode anymore. I'm not going to worry anymore. And they've completely dropped it, and they've been able to just step outside it. Now, for the majority of us, that isn't what happens. Usually we have to go through what will I call it? Not a system, but a process of unlearning the triggered response, unlearning the usual response that we have to fear, and being in a space of creating a new response or a new habit, and allowing ourselves to take a step back. And that's a process that can take time. And it may be that you master it for one area of your life, or one fear that normally triggers you. But then when it comes to another fear or a different area of your life, it might be totally different. And you might find that you find it harder to be the observer, or equally, it can work the other way. You may find it easier to take that step back and to be the observer. Either way, that is what we're aiming for. We're aiming for being in the presence of fear without getting sucked in, taking that step back, being the observer, seeing it for what it is, and then observing the fear, observing it playing out without letting it trigger you, and just watching it, just watching what's happening. And you might say, well, like, how can I do that? Because I'm me. How can I watch me? And it's a funny way, it's a funny state to be in. It's not funny, haha, but it can be funny, peculiar in that we're used to projecting our consciousness out into our environment, out into everything that's happening around us. And what happens is when we project ourselves out into it, we get sucked in. So it's like, you know, if you have a fishing rod and you're reeling it back in, you're reeling your consciousness back in, you're reeling it back in. And for me, the point that I reel it back into is a point at the back of my head. It's almost like it's not where the pineal gland is, a little bit where the pineal gland is, but a bit behind that. So if you can imagine, you know where the occipital ridge is at the back of your head. If you pick that point and you reel your consciousness back into that point, and you can do that simply by focusing on that point. So if you take your awareness, so say there's something going on in your life, say there's something in your environment, some person, let's say you're at work and one of your colleagues starts talking about something and starts giving out about something that's happening, and they're really loud, and you find yourself being drawn, being sucked into their energy, their chaos, their drama. So your consciousness is being projected out into their fear energy. So you want to reel it back in. So the way to do that is to focus on that point behind your head, your occipital ridge. And just by simply doing that, just simply taking a moment to focus on that point. Now, to start with, you're going to want to close your eyes to do this. Now, granted, I know that if you're in your office or in a work situation, you probably can't close your eyes. So you're going to start practicing this in meditation. So you're going to start reeling your consciousness back in, focusing on that point at the back of your head. And you're just going to sit with that. That's all you're going to do to begin. You're just going to sit with your focus on that point at the back of your head. And then what's going to happen is over time, you'll get used to bringing yourself to that point. And when there is that chaos going on in your environment, if somebody is sucking you into their drama, you can then begin to focus on it without having to close your eyes. You'll be able to suck or reel your consciousness back in. And that's how you be the observer. So for me, this is a process that I've learned through just practicing, through being in meditation and experimenting with this. And I still have to experiment. There are times when something may happen and I will totally get sucked into it, but I don't judge that. I allow myself then, when I notice if I'm getting sucked in, to become the observer, because it's never too late to become the observer. But there's going to be times when you do get sucked in, and that is okay. It's the effort that you put into it. It's trying and not giving up. And each time you notice that maybe you have got pulled into some drama or some worry or some fear, just allowing yourself. And by the way, the fear can be in your head. It doesn't have to be outside of you. It doesn't have to be another person that's causing it. It can be a worry. It can be a worry about a bill you have to pay, about a person in your life. It can be a worry about your health. So when that happens and it's in your mind, again, you do the same thing. You stop focusing on the issue or the perceived problem, and you just focus on that point at the back of your head, and you just stay there and stay there for as long as needed. But when you start doing that, you'll notice that you become the observer, and you're not going to be in the fear as much when you reel your consciousness back in. So I hope that makes sense, because it is a little bit of a concept that you have to get your head around, pardon the pun. But once you start doing that, you will start to notice that you can be the observer rather than being pulled every which way by every little fear and every little drama that's happening. And then that's when you start to notice, oh, I don't have to be triggered by this fear. I don't have to be in this fear. I don't have to be immersed in it. I can take that step back. I can be the observer, and I can allow myself to watch what's happening without engaging with it. And that's when you take your power back and you start to realize, oh, okay, I can just watch this play out, knowing that it's all going to be fine, knowing that this has played out millions of times before and everything has worked out, and knowing that it always ends well. So being in the space of observing, witnessing what's happening, being in that space where you move beyond the fear through not being triggered by the fear. And that's when you can be with the fear and just allow it. And that is such a place of freedom, because you don't have to be pulled every which way, and you don't have to be drawn into every little fear that your mind is going to focus on. And you can just be the observer, and that is such freedom. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you go and practice this. The first thing to do, as I said, is to practice being in your meditation and just bringing your consciousness or your point of focus to the back of your head, and just staying there and just seeing how that is. And you're going to notice you'll be able to do that maybe for a few seconds, maybe for a few minutes, and then suddenly you'll notice you're thinking about something, and that's when you reel it back in. And that's why meditation is so good at practicing this, because then when it comes to life and to real worries or whatever it is, or real situations that pop up, then you'll have practiced this and you'll be able to reel yourself back in, and it'll become easier and easier the more you do it. So go and try it. Let me know how you get on. And once you do start doing this on a consistent basis, you will notice huge changes in your outlook, in your life, in the amount of freedom and joy that you experience. So go and try it. And thank you as always for being here. I do appreciate you. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm at Sandra Ray Angelic Bodies, and I'm also on Facebook as well as Sandra Ray, so you can follow me there. And I will chat to you again next week. See you in the next episode. Bye bye.